I was in the middle of doing the egg when a really original thought just popped into my head. So we might as well put it in the video. It's really nice out here and a good temperature. Maybe we'll just do it out here. So in the Bible, you know, canonically, sin enters the world through Adam and Eve eating of the fruit, right? Everyone kind of knows that. Mythologically, Adam and Eve were created by God, and their sons, Cain and Abel, in some kind of sense are like the first humans because they were born from humans. They're the first humans to have a life arc like ours. I guess we'll sort of state whether you think this is literal or just a mythological, very deep archetypal thing. What I'm gonna say will be useful either way. So God calls on Cain and Abel to make a sacrifice. I kind of forget why, but he calls on them to make a sacrifice, each of them. Abel's sacrifice, I don't think it says exactly what it is, but it involves blood. It's like he sacrifices a sheep or something like that. And Cain sacrifices like vegetables or things he's grown. You know, part of the idea is you sacrifice something that's valuable to you. The reason I'll just say this as a quick summary. The reason sacrifice became a thing with human beings is because we discovered the future. One thing that makes us different than a lot of even advanced mammals is we can conceptualize time. Even, you know, chimpanzees and things like that have essentially no real perception or conceptualization of time. Although it's a little hard to ask them, but you know, there are ways they can kind of study this. So the idea of sacrifice is a thing in all ancient religions, more or less, because it's the realization that if you sacrifice something you want today, you can get more tomorrow. You know, this coincides with agriculture. Obviously, you plant crops today and you can't get the crops today. You have to wait months. Somebody's listening, let's move. Here, I never hang out around this tree. So anyway, let's go back to the whole Cain and Abel thing. One of the great mysteries of this story, which people have pondered for thousands of years, is like, why did God reject Cain's sacrifice? Obviously, like, they're both sacrificing something valuable. Whether you're raising sheep or you're growing crops, like, it both takes a lot of work, obviously. And it's not obvious why one would be valuable and the other isn't in any sense at all. So sort of the traditional view is that Cain sinned in some way. Cain did something wrong in some way with the sacrifice that he gave. I don't know if literally everybody agrees with that, but that's a very common idea. A thought occurred to me that I have never heard anybody say that makes perfect sense. And I did a little bit of research. I think I may be the first person in human history to enunciate this, or at least that I can find. I mean, maybe somebody, but I don't know. Cain's mistake was not offering the wrong thing. Cain's mistake was not taking a long-term view. So after Cain's sacrifice was rejected, he goes to God and they say a few things, but one of the things God says to Cain is, if you do well, will you not be accepted? There are kind of different translations of this verse, and I know I've looked at the Hebrew before, but it's basically just like, if you make the right sacrifices, it'll go well with you. So the thing that got me thinking about this is like, okay, what would I do if that was me? And I had no idea what was about to happen. What I would do, I would just try to do better next time. Instead, what Cain does is he murders his brother who did make an acceptable sacrifice, in case you didn't know. So what occurred to me is that Cain considered his failure permanent. Cain looked at one instance of his life and decided that's who he was. He identified with his failure, and he especially identified with it because he had no idea why he failed. So obviously you can look at the arbitrariness of the world, the mystery of the world, and just decide that you're never going to understand it and that it's hopeless. And see, like, God doesn't quite spell it out super obviously, but he's basically saying like, hey, listen, start making the sacrifices the right way And you'll know because it starts working out for you. I think God is not explicitly telling him to keep making sacrifices because it needs to be his own agency. Like, obviously, his problem is not having agency. You know, he's not seeing himself as powerful and able to control his destiny. And so, you know, if you just tell that person, basically, if you tell a person like that what they should do, you're robbing them of the opportunity to figure out their life. So yeah, I don't think anybody's ever thought that before. Let me know in the comments if somebody has. Also, the fact that this is at the beginning of humanity, you could understand why the theme of not taking the long-term view is so relevant. You know, in the same way that when you're a child, you can't conceive of what 10 years is like because you're not 10 years old. You know, it's like mythologically, that's kind of the same thing at the beginning of humanity's history. And Cain's just taken the really wrong lesson from that. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. If you have failed at something, the most primal sin, the most primal mistake you can make is to assume that, well, it's mysterious and I can't figure it out, so I'm just gonna quit. We're just gonna give up and we're gonna be resentful and we're gonna destroy everything good. A lot of people do that. Sometimes even it seems like most people do that, but it's a real mistake. Who knows what Cain and everybody else could have been doing. Could have been a really great figure in human history, but just ended up being the first murderer. Ultimately, that's kind of what it is to not sacrifice or not sacrifice correctly. You're fundamentally just sacrificing the future.